All right. Well, we're picking up the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna
Or
again
are you
today.
on mute?
Oh, then I wouldn't have heard you say that. Where would I be then? All right, muting everyone. But of course, please know that this is only so we don't hear telephones and passing cars. Please speak up for whatever reason. If it's a good enough reason for you to say it, it's a good enough reason for me to hear it. So don't be shy at all. So we are on what chapter is this? Chapter 25, and we're on the second from the last page. Ramakrishna has been singing and dancing with the devotees and having a wonderful conversation. And we're going to pick up just for a few lines of it, actually a page of it, before the end of the chapter. And it's interesting because it's very apropos to what I was just talking about. So the scene starts today. It says Sri Ramakrishna danced with the devotees. The musician and his party joined the master in the music and dancing. Soon the whole veranda was filled with people. The ladies witnessed this scene of joy from an adjoining room. It appeared as if Chaitanya himself were dancing with his devotees, intoxicated with divine love. And this is a marvelous scene that as Westerners we don't get the privilege of seeing this very often. I've only seen it twice in my life, and both of them happened when I was taking my vows of sannyas in India. When we had all gone out for begging for food, and the tradition was is that we would all bring our food back in our little. It wasn't a begging bowl; it was a begging rag, actually. Anyway, that's another story. I'm tempted to go into it, but when we all were coming back, one by one from our begging, some of the bros had gotten down and pulled out the instruments, and we're all singing, and so people were starting to just kind of engage in that, and we were singing these wonderful devotional songs, and little by little, people started moving, and then there was just this wonderful dance of joy, I would call it. We were all on the verge of taking our sannyas vows, or had just taken our sannyas vows, and we're, coming back from the begging, which, is quite an experience. And all of us had gotten our new Swami names and were in our new Garawa. And so it was really just a beautiful moment for all of us. And to see that expressed in dancing, not to dance, all the dancing I've ever seen has been for pleasure, has been for moving to the music and getting the dance moves down. This dancing had nothing to do with that. This dancing was about expressing one thing, and that was this wonderful bliss, this wonderful joy that all of us were feeling inside at the potential of this newness, the potential of this moment. And it was such a wonderful experience, and it really changed it gave me an understanding. It didn't change my understanding, but it gave me an understanding of what this scene is that happens quite a few times in the gospel, where people are dancing in divine joy, listening to some kirtan or some bhajans, and just moved by it. So they're not really even, in a weird sense, their awareness of the present has expanded beyond the room and the music, so like they're dancing, but their mind is elsewhere. Their mind is absorbed in the motive of the dance. It's quite an astounding sight to see. And so when he's talking here, I just want to kind of bring that up so you can kind of get this picture of what the atmosphere of this room was like. That you have the master, an enlightened soul who sees truth always, dancing in a divine ecstasy with all of the devotees joining him in the room, with the veranda filled with people. And the writer says, or M says, it appeared as if Chaitanya himself, Chaitanya was also an incarnation, a direct manifestation of this divine principle. And so all of them dancing in this room, it was unmistakable what was happening, of what was manifesting there. So it appeared as if Chaitanya himself were dancing with his devotees, intoxicated with the divine love. It was not yet dusk. Sri Ramakrishna returned to the drawing room with the devotees. The master, to Shashadhar. Shashadhar is that pundit, the scholar that he's been conversing with. And he says to Shashadhar, "This is called Bhajanananda, the bliss of the devotees and the worship of God. Worldly people keep themselves engrossed in the joy of sensuous objects, of woman and gold. Through worship, devotees receive the grace of God and then his vision. Then they enjoy Brahmananda, the bliss of Brahman. Shashidhar and the devotees listen to these words with rapt attention. So he's telling them what you're seeing here is not an ordinary sight. It's precisely what I was trying to say. Here he says this is called the bliss, the bhajanananda, the bliss of the devotees in their worship of the divine, and that it comes through. It's a spontaneous expression of an internal condition, an internal knowing, and just this wonderful joy that they're having here. So Shashidhar humbly says to Ramakrishna, "Sir, please tell us what kind of yearning gives one this blissful state of mind, right? How is this happening? Where is this coming from?" Master, one feels restlessness for God when one's soul longs for his vision. The Guru said to the disciple, "Come with me. I shall show you what kind of longing will enable you to see God." Saying this, he took the disciple to a pond. They stepped down into the pond and he pressed his disciple's head under the water. After a few moments, he released the disciple and asked, "How did you feel?" The disciple answered, "Oh, I felt as if I were dying. I was longing for a breath of air." So this is the single-minded focus that we should have for this vision of God. Okay, the vision of God. They're talking in terms of the devotional path, bhakti yoga. But you could, the Jnani could talk about this as the longing for a manifestation of the divine truth, the reality. What people often ask me all my life, actually, why I was so interested in religion. And I told them I really wasn't interested in religion per se, that I just wanted to know what was going on. I just wanted to know what's up. What is this thing? None of it made sense to me. Just me as a body, just running around looking for things to enjoy. I was like, this that really can't be what this life is about. I mean, that I would be such a parasite on the world that all I would do is be sucking enjoyment off of it. I wanted to know, like, what in the world is going on behind the scenes? Where is this all coming from? And why? One of my favorite YouTube videos, it was titled, "Why Is There Anything?" Right? And he had made this scientific question of why is the universe full? Why is there so much going on? There's in a world of time, space, and causation, what would be a cause? What would be an initial cause in something like this? Why would that happen? Right? And so this young disciple pressed his head, had his head held underwater. All he could think about was getting some air, right? With that, you can imagine that intensity. And if you can't, go stick your head in the sink for 35 seconds and feel how that feels, that desperation, that how much you need it, how important it is. And this is what it is with spiritual life, this realization, not religion itself. The religion itself is not important, right? It's the investigation and the tools of investigation that religion provides that's important. But the most important thing is that wanting to know, that yearning for an understanding of who you are, what you are, and what this world is. Because only through knowing what you are can you find out the means of living a worthwhile life, a fulfilling life, a life that has meaning, which incidentally is one of the things that those three gentlemen were discussing at length in that conversation, was the fact that that it's they're looking at the things that give isness meaning. They're not just looking for the hows. They say that the unique thing of these spiritual ideals is that they give meaning to things, and that's something that just normal facts and figures can't do. Something AI will never be able to do, because the AI doesn't have an understanding of meaning. It doesn't know why it's doing what it's doing. It's not even aware of what exactly it's doing. It's just following a presupposed set of rules, algorithms, and putting out the process. And so whether AI is drawing a picture or writing a song or summarizing a web page, all three of those are the same process to the AI. It does not have a concept of what it's actually doing. And that's why they call it artificial intelligence. And that is what they are trying to find out about our experience. What is it in us that gives meaning to things? What is it that knows what meaning is within us? All right. So now Shashidhar, after hearing this example of this young man being pushed underwater, he says, yes, yes, that's it. I understand now of what this longing is, to understand the importance of knowing what we are. The master, to love God is the essence of the whole thing. Bhakti alone, bhakti is that spirit, that devotional practice, of course. Bhakti alone is the essence, that pure love. Narada said to Rama, may I always have pure love for your lotus feet, and may I not be deluded by your world bewitching Maya. Rama said to him, ask for some other boon. No, said Narada, I don't want anything else. May I have the love for your lotus feet. This is my only prayer. There's lots of beautiful things in there. To love God. Okay. What is God? Right. Well, God is that with that Satchitananda, and that image of Satchitananda is in every one of us. Right. And so for loving God, we're not, like Holy Mother says, we're not loving a gas, something out there that you can't know what it is that you're falling in love with. She says, how could you possibly do that? And so that's why Ramakrishna says that the highest form of worship is to love God in everything, in living beings. That's the manifestation. And so to love God is indirectly saying, love one another, love everything, just love, have this notion of oneness with all things, and empower your nature to alleviate suffering, because that's what your nature does. That's what Satchitananda does. It alleviates suffering. Here comes Jennifer. All right. To love God is the essence of the whole thing. Bhakti alone is the essence. So the essence of the universe, right? The essence of this universe is an unconditioned love, a love that is the motivation for everything that happens. All actions are rooted in this divine love. Vivekananda says that the only motivating force in the universe is love. And then he says something very interesting, which sounded very poetic, but he meant it very, very literally, I think. He said, it is for love that the electrons circle the nucleus. It is for love alone that gravity pulls all things to itself. It's for love alone that the planets are attracted to the sun. That he says the only motivating force in the universe is divine love. And then, of course, that's the same lecture where he goes on to say the reason that everything goes in circles in the creation is because that's the only way of manifesting the idea of infinity in the finite, which I also thought was a rather poetic.
Can you expand on that, please? The gravitational force?
Yes, well, I don't know that there's a lot to expand on. He's just saying that all force, all things that cause an action are rooted in divine love. That divine love is the only thing that motivates change, or motivates change, motivates action. And so that's one of the reasons that the visible universe is in constant flux, in constant change, right? Because it is the manifestation of the absolute unchanging, this Satchitananda, this divine aspect. And so if the nature of that divine aspect is pure love, then anything that moves out of it, anything that is expressed from it as such, we're going to run into some troubles there, because we're talking about things that are outside of the dream from inside the dream. So we're not really allowed to do that. We can't say anything about the ultimate reality. No sentence can work, because all sentences have subject, object, verb. The divine reality does not fall into that requirement. The mind requires past, present, future, right? And the divine quality cannot be placed into that. And also the time, space, and causation, the other triad. There's three triads that the mind uses in order to put a handle on the one without a second, so that we can experience it as such. And so it requires that the mind has come up with those three triads, those three tools for thinking, for allowing us to deal with ignorance, for allowing us to not know something and to work toward that transcendence, right? So that's why we can't really talk about it. All right, I'm getting all over the place, actually. To love God is the essence of the whole thing. Bhakti alone is the essence. Narada said to Rama, may I always have pure love for your lotus feet, and may I not be deluded by your world-bewitching Maya. Rama said to him, ask for some other boon. Now, this is interesting because this is very reminiscent of the Katha Upanishad, right? My favorite, my favorite Upanishad, where our young man Nachiketas is asking this, not asking the same question, but similar. I want to know the truth of things. I want to know what is the meaning of life. What happens after death? What is the reality? And it's funny because in there also Yama is telling him, no, ask something else. I'll tell you anything else. I'll give you dancing girls. I'll give you celestial babes, that will come down, the beauty which has never been manifested on earth before. And our young man Nachiketas is like, nope, I don't want all those things, and gives us lots of wisdom in that whole conversation. But why? In this one here, Ramakrishna gives a rather fun answer to why Narada is saying, ask for something else. He says that the divine is very reticent about giving divine love to people, because he says God would be enslaved to that person, right? God cannot resist anything asked in pure love. And so he's very careful about giving out pure love or prema to to mortals, as it were, to people like you and I, right? Because he would become enslaved to that pure love. It would be himself seeing himself, actually. So Rama said to him, ask for some other boon. No, said Narada, I don't want anything else. May I have love for your lotus feet. This is my only prayer. And interestingly enough, this is our goal as such in spiritual life also, is to keep our focus. That's why renunciation is so important, why discernment is so important in this I don't know what you want to call religion. What do you want to call it? Our effort, our mutual effort here. Who knows? But that I'm sorry. It's kind of funny when these things start entering the mind and you realize we don't know the first thing. The first thing that we want to know, we can't put into words. It doesn't fit. So, all right. I don't want anything else. And so life here is us trying to come to the point of saying, I don't want anything else but the knowledge of God, or the vision of God, or however you want to phrase that for yourself. We're trying to reach that perspective. And in the meantime, God is playing with us by giving us opportunities for all the things that we're saying we don't want. Right? So, Nachiketa sitting in the waiting room of death, and Rama and Yama is telling him, I'll give you dancing girls of celestial beauty. I'll give you immortality. I'll give you infinite knowledge. I'll give you all these things. And Nachiketas is going through, each time he's offered something, he discerns first. He's like, the longest life is short indeed on the last day. You can keep your long life. I don't need a long life. Your dancing women, all these things will age and lose their beauty, or my mind will lose its interest in them over time. Keep your dancing girls, keep your celestial music, keep all of this. So he's just kind of showing the process that as we sit here, like Nachiketus was sitting in death's waiting room, we also are sitting in death's waiting room, right? We're in the land of Yama right here. Death rules supreme here. Nobody has escaped it. Well, of course, Jesus, anybody who realizes escapes it, but as such, as far as we know from this side. But that we sit here in the divine waiting room, waiting for the undoing of the body mind, and we're being offered all of these pleasures, all of these goals, all of these purposes in life, all of these reasons for living, and we can choose from any of them, right? But the one that actually brings us to the goal is to have that single-mindedness. I want nothing else but a knowledge of truth, of knowing exactly what I am and what this is that I seem to be involved in, right? Pandit Shashadhar was ready to leave. Sri Ramakrishna asked a devotee to bring a carriage for the Pandit. Shashadhar, oh, don't trouble yourself. I will walk. Master smiling, how can that be? You are beyond the reach of even Brahma's meditation. Shashadhar, there is no particular need of my going just now. The only thing is that I shall have to perform my sandhya, his rituals. Master, the Divine Mother has taken away my sandhya and other devotions. The purpose of sandhya is to purify body and mind. I am no longer in that state. Right? So he's come to the knowledge of not being body-mind. And by that spirit identification, there's no me and mind for him, except that sliver that was necessary for him to hold a body, to keep a body in there. And so he doesn't have to do things to help him separate his sense of self from a body and from a mind, right? So he's moved beyond that. For us, we have to do all these devotions and rituals and practices according to the path that we're on. Each path has its scaffolding for reaching the divine realization or the ultimate truth of things. And we have to do those until the mind is purified, which means what? Until there's no more me and mine in the mind, right? And that is the symptom of egoism. Selfishness is the symptom of egoism, right? When we move and identify with the body mind, because it's singular and it's small, naturally its desires are selfish for its own protection, its own caretaking, its own advantage, right? And so the ego forms as a form of protection to protect us from ignorance, from the effects of ignorance. So we create a little helmet called ego that we wear that gives us a false illusion of being okay. Everything's going to be fine. I'm in charge. I'm in control. I can make my plans. I can make these things happen, right? And so we get this little helmet of ignorance called ego that allows us to navigate in something that we know nothing about, right? And so the undoing of that is purifying the mind, undoing me and mine, removing that thought from the mind is what leads to a calm mind, and pure mind, a mind with no me and mine, and Brahman, or the ultimate nature of the divine, are one. They are not different. And so Ramakrishna is saying that I'm in that state already, so I don't have to do my sandhya today. The master sings the following lines of a song. When will you learn to lie, O mind, in the abode of blessedness, with cleanliness and defilement on either side of you? Only when you have found the way to keep these wives contentedly under a single roof will you behold the matchless form of Mother Shyama. All right, so cleanliness and defilement, right? Good and evil, wicked and righteous. He says, only when you have found the means of keeping those two wives of yours, those that they follow us everywhere, cleanliness and defilement on either side of us, only when you find a way of being in which both of those wives can live contentedly under a single roof, right? That is when you come to know, this is all very fascinating because, in the Garden of Eden, I sound like a broken record, But you know, in the Garden of Eden, when Eve eats of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, what is the knowledge of good and evil? That's egoism. It's having a perspective that's separate from the divine order of things, and what is in conflict with the divine order of things, or not in line with Satchitananda, love, wisdom, and being. That is vice. Those are the things that take us deeper into ignorance, right? Take us away from our knowledge of self. And those things that bring us toward that oneness, that bring us to that unity, those things are virtue. Those are the things that are helpful to finding this unity, to finding this ultimate truth to things. And so when we arrive at that ultimate truth, there is no such thing as evil, right? There is nothing contrary within us to our nature, to love, wisdom, and being. And so when we come to that place where we see and experience directly that the motivation of all things is pure love, then no longer are we experiencing evil, right? Because nothing is opposed to us. Everything is working together for good in that reality. Pandit Shashadhar salutes the master and goes away. Ram, I visited Shashadhar yesterday. You asked me to. Master, did I? I don't remember, but it is nice that you went. Ram, the editor of a newspaper was abusing you. Master, suppose he was. Does it matter? Right? That's the perfect response. Oh yeah, some editor is writing bad things about you. Oh, is that so? Does it matter? Like, why would you tell me that? I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. Suppose he was. What does it matter? Ram, please listen. Then I began to talk to the editor about you. He wanted to hear more and wouldn't let me go. It was dusk, and Sri Ramakrishna began to chant the names of the Divine Mother, of Krishna and Rama and Hari. The devotees sat in silence. The master chanted the names in such a sweet tone that the hearts of the devotees were deeply touched. That day, Balaram's house was like Navadvip when Chaitanya lived there. On that veranda, it was like Navadvip, and in the parlor, it was like Brindavan, right? So all these locations of these divine plays where the incarnations came, he could have added Jerusalem, perhaps, to there. That same night, Sri Ramakrishna was to go to Dakshineshwar. Balaram took him into the inner apartments and served him with refreshments. The ladies of the family saluted the master. The devotees were singing kirtan in the drawing room, awaiting the master's coming. Presently, Sri Ramakrishna came and joined the singers. The kirtan went on. Behold, my Gora is dancing with the devotees. He dances in Shriva's courtyard, singing the kirtan. Gora says to all, repeat the name of Hari. He looks at Gadadhar, and from his red eyes are flowing the tears of love over his golden body. The master improvised the lines. Gora is dancing in the kirtan. There he dances, Sachi's darling. There he dances, my Gauranga. There he dances, my soul's beloved. And that brings us to the end of chapter 25. So we'll jump in to chapter 26, the festival at Adar's house. It's Sunday, August 3rd, 1884. And just before we jump into this, anybody have any comments or questions on what we just finished reading through? Or any ideas in there? Any concerns about it? Yes, Matt. You might have to.
Yeah, I think I got it. Oh, I guess it's raising my hand too. So, yeah, I
That's
have
right.
a question. So,
Uh-huh.
I mean, this is interesting because I understand what you're saying. You talked about manifestation arising as an expression of love, whereas Advaita usually talks about manifestation arising as an expression of ignorance. What are your thoughts, and how do you reconcile those? Because
Well,
they seem very different.
yes. Well, you can't. It is an expression of uh, ignorance because it's an unknowing. We are uh, not knowing our nature, not knowing the truth. And so our actions manifest within that as ignorance, right? But that which is not ignorant is the one that actually is manifesting all of this, right? So in me, it's not ignorance that's manifesting; it's the divine love, or the divine perfection, or the divine principle flowing through a lens of ignorance. And so what is expressed is ignorance out this side, but that which is coming in this side of the lens before it goes through the lens of body mind is divine love, is the perfect self, right? That perfect isness, Satchitananda. And when that Satchitananda, which is the image of God that we've all been created in, to use Christian speak, when that expresses through a mind and a body of ignorance, of non-knowledge, no knowledge of what it is and who it is, and that self identifies with something it is not, which is body mind, which is limitation, both physical and mental. When it comes out the front as the personality of me, that's ignorance, right? And that's love shining through ignorance. But that which shines, that pure witness, that pure light of awareness, is love itself. It's at that point, it's not loving, it's love itself. And so love itself hits this lens, and through this manifestation, it expresses itself, right? But it expresses itself through a partiality, through a set of limitations and restrictions. And what comes out the other side is ignorance. So ignorance is not a thing in and of itself that could be the source of anything as it is, because ignorance is a lack of something. It's an absence of something. So it's not a thing that could express, but that absence of knowledge is what distorts the lens of pure love that shines as the self onto the back of our head, goes through our minds and bodies of ignorance, the ignorance of being body and mind and thinking that's who we are, and then coming out as an expression of divine love as it looks when expressed through a partiality, through a limitation, through a restriction. Does that help at all, or does that make sense at all?
Yeah, I think that helps. I'll just let it sink in.
Yeah. And so, like that. All right, that was good. Anyone else have anything, a concern or something to add to that?
I was thinking, Swami, that we all have knowledge, but it's covered by the ignorance. Sometimes it's a layers. Like that's what we are removing, all those toxic layers to get to the actual knowledge of our consciousness, knowledge, bliss, Satchitananda. I would say.
Right. Yeah. Well, we have to remove egoism. Egoism is ignorance.
That's right.
Right. And if you want to start with ego, then yes, life is a manifestation of ignorance. Mm-hmm. But ego is not self motivated. It's nothing in and of itself. It's not an inherent reality. The inherent reality behind egoism is the love of God shining through. And to talk about knowledge in those terms, we have to kind of understand what the first lesson Ramakrishna teaches, or one of the first lessons that he teaches is what is knowledge. That knowledge for us, when the scriptures say knowledge, they mean the knowledge of what you are. That's the only important thing to know in this world. That's the only thing that actually is helpful in this
self-realization.
Right. Yes, that knowledge of self. And any other kind of knowledge is just relative knowledge. It's knowledge that gets stored in the mind. And so it's not inherently true. It's relatively true. As long as the things that you have it in relationship with in your mind are true to that relationship, and do in fact establish this piece of of mind knowledge, let's call it as true, that's fine. But it needs that system of relativity in order to be true. For Ramakrishna, when he says the scriptures talk of knowledge, they're talking about that which is always true, No condition, no circumstance can change it. And so, yes, when we arrive at that knowledge, that is the true knowledge. And through knowing that, everything else is known. Right? Everything else is known.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Dhyana Yogananda one time gave a retreat in Atlanta. He said that we forgot to do we left the self-inquiry because of the sense pleasures. We are attracted towards the sense pleasures, and we totally left this. Now we are trying to get to the self-inquiry, self-realization.
Yeah.
That's what we are.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, that's very true. And the reason it's so difficult is because that true self, the truth of what we are, is unchanging.
Yes.
Right. And so it doesn't make any noise. It doesn't glitter. It doesn't flash. It doesn't, set off an alarm. And so once we step off of it into the senses, it's very difficult to find our way back, because there's nothing. Once you get in the senses, we get accustomed to living
in the external world.
In the external world, right, where we're looking outward at objects and things that are constantly changing in a non-repeating way, just a constant flow of change.
That's right.
And to get our attention off of that which changes, which we've talked about in the past, that our senses and our mind are set up in such a way that they're attracted to change.
Yeah.
And we talk about that McDonald's bag blowing down the beach, that you can be watching that beautiful sunset, and which is inexplicable in its cause and amazing in its beauty. But to get the mind to take its attention off of that, all that's necessary is an empty McDonald's bag blowing down the beach. And suddenly your mind is no longer interested in this extraordinary, inexplicable beauty of the entire sky, but now is fascinated with this blowing bag on the beach. And that's our trouble. We as divine selves, there is that bliss within us. There is contentment within us. There is infinite knowledge within us. All of these things come from within, not from outside. Exactly. But we blame the outside, and we get interested in the outside, and to become uninterested in the changing in order to be captured by the unchanging, which cannot be objectified, cannot be placed in front of the senses or studied in front of the senses, because it is the thing that is studying. It is the thing that is looking, right? Can't be objectified. It gets very difficult for us to find our way back to real knowledge, because we've become so fascinated with this puzzle of incomplete knowledge or ignorance,
Thank you so much. Thanks for the clarification.
Yes. All right. Festival at Adar's house. Sunday, August 3rd, 1884. Sri Ramakrishna was sitting in his room in the temple garden at Dakshineshwar after his midday meal. A party of balls, those storytellers that I've only seen them at Bellarmont during Shivaratri. They wear the particular band or group of balls that perform every year at Bellarmont. They wear these long black-haired wigs, and they carry these big staffs, and they all have an instrument and whatnot, and they tell a story, but it's sort of half theater and half storytelling. So they're using their sounds and their bodies and their staves and their props and whatnot to tell a story, not act it out necessarily, but to enhance the telling of the story. So there's a party of balls from Shibpur here. There's several devotees from Bhawanipur. There's Balaram, who has that beautiful house downtown Calcutta that Ramakrishna spent so much time at, and M, who actually wrote the gospel. They were all in the room. Rakal, Latu, and Harish were then living with the master. They too were present. When the scriptures tell us who's present in the room, I think there's reason for that, because that way you get an idea of who he's talking to, because not all teachings are the same for all people, right? And so that's why they say there's really two books about Ramakrishna that are very important. You've got the gospel, which we're reading now. That's when householders were in the room. Occasionally there would be another monk or two, or some of the young men who became monks later on. But it was Thakur talking to people, to you and me, regular folks, right? And then in the Great Master, that other book, which you should always read after you read the gospel. the great master is what he was talking to, what he taught to his direct disciples, to the monastics. And so you get lots of detail about his sadhanas and his practices and what he went through, and his realizations and how they seem to happen for him. And it's an eye-opening book.
What is the name of the book, Swami?
The Great Master.
Great Master. Okay.
The Great Master, yeah.
The Great Master.
By Sharadananda. It's been rewritten or retranslated as Sri Ramakrishna and His Divine Play by Swami Chaitanananda. But with no offense to Chaitanananda's version, which actually is much better English and much easier to read. I don't know if it's because I read it second or not, but when I read the Great Master, it punched me in the face a lot harder than the second book did. So I sort of half recommend reading the original Great Master as opposed to the rewrite. Sure. The master began the conversation by addressing the Baul musicians from Shibpur. Master, yoga is not possible if the mind dwells on lust and greed, right? Woman in gold. The mind of a worldly man generally moves among the three lower centers, those of the navel, at the sexual organ, and at the organ of evacuation. After great effort and spiritual practice, the Kundalini, the spiritual energy, is awakened. According to the yogis, there are three nerves in the spinal column, the Ida, the Pingala, and the Sushumna. Along the Sushumna are 6 lotuses or centers, the lowest being known as the Muladhara. Then come successively the Svadhisthana, the Manipura, the Anahata, the Vishuddha, and the Agnya. These are the 6 centers. The Kundalini, when awakened, passes through the lower centers and comes to the Anahata, which is in the heart. It stays there, right? At that time, the mind of the aspirant is withdrawn from the 3 lower centers, right? The food, sex, and evacuation. He feels the awakening of divine consciousness, this awareness of a divine nature that is behind itself. As it's slowly losing interest in what is in front of it, it starts becoming aware of what's behind it. This divine consciousness is awakened. And he sees light. In mute wonder, he sees that radiance and cries out, "What is this? What is this?" After passing through the 6 centers, the Kundalini reaches the 1,000-petaled lotus known as the Sahasrara, and the aspirant goes into samadhi. All right. So this passes through all of these other centers, comes to the top center here, and just before it leaves the body and goes and has that samadhi, that experience, which isn't an experience because there's no experiencer. Samadhi, that union, that one without a second, if it's the highest samadhi, that nirvikalpa samadhi. Right? There's no more distinction. There's no more separations. We find in that state that it is ego that has put in all of the boundaries of the universe, that has caused us to experience objects because we viewed ourself as an object, right? We placed ourself at the center and then through our senses saw the rest of the world. And that's what they call consciousness. Remember that Sri Nisargadatta gave a great pointer that awareness is consciousness. No, consciousness is awareness with objects in it. That's the easiest way to say it. So the ultimate reality is awareness, right? But it's awareness alone. There's nothing to be aware of in the divine reality, in that highest state, which isn't a state. But anything else, we have objects in it. Our awareness has objects, and so that's called consciousness. So when you're conscious of something, that's consciousness. When you're consciousness of nothing, that's awareness. And so that's why in the path of Jnana Yoga, if you're taking that path, the practice is to keep your awareness on awareness, right? So you turn your back, as it were, objects, on the separations that egoism is causing. All right. So reaching the 1,000-petaled lotus known as the Sahasrara, the aspirant goes into samadhi. According to the Vedas, these centers are called bhumi, or plains. There are 7 such plains. The center at the heart corresponds to the 4th plane of the Vedas. According to the Tantra, there is this center, a lotus called Anahata, with 12 petals. The center, known as Vishuddha, is the 5th plane. This center is at the throat and has a lotus with 16 petals. When the Kundalini reaches this plane, the devotee longs to talk and hear only about God. Conversation on worldly subjects, conversation on lust and greed causes him great pain. He leaves a place where people talk of these matters. Then comes the 6th plane, corresponding to the center known as Ajna. The center is located between the eyebrows, and it has a lotus with 2 petals. When the Kundalini reaches it, the aspirant sees the form of God. But still there remains a slight barrier between the devotee and God. It is like a light inside of a lantern. You may think you have touched the light, but in reality you cannot because of the barrier of glass, right? So that's the highest realization, where you're still aware of other. You're still aware of something else. And that's the state you can, if you're going to go to one of the lokas, instead of that realization, if you want to go to one of the lokas, you remain in that state where you can go enjoy the bliss of Ramakrishna, or of Jesus, or of Krishna, or Rama, or Buddha, as you like. They each have a loka where devotees can come and enjoy sugar instead of becoming sugar, as Ramakrishna says. Very interesting aspect of theology coming from Ramakrishna there, where he says that it is possible. He says that God takes a form because the devotees, like water becomes ice. It's the coolness that causes water to become ice. And he says, consequently, it's the devotee's devotion which causes God to freeze into a form as well. And so that's why we have Jesuses and Buddhas and Ramas and Krishnas. Is because the devotion of the devotee freezes God into that form. And then he makes that startling statement, which I just bring up because I found it very fascinating. He says there are places in the ocean where the ice never melts. And so it does give room for the Christians to have their heaven with their Jesus, and, for the lovers of Krishna to have their eternal dance to the flute playing around the fire in the woods with their beloved Krishna, and such like that. So God has made room for everyone and everything in all of its many forms. All right, so then comes the 6th plane of the 2 lotus, the 2 petals. The aspirant sees the form of God, but still there remains a slight barrier, right? Just like the lantern glass and its light. And last of all is the 7th plane, which according to Tantra is the center of the 1,000-petal lotus. When the Kundalini arrives here, the aspirant goes into samadhi. In that lotus dwells Satchit Ananda Shiva, the Absolute. There, Kundalini, the awakened power, unites with Shiva, the Absolute Unchanging, right? This is known as the union of Shiva and Shakti, right? Shakti is the world of change, the world of constant change. And Shiva is the world of Shakti with no change, right? And that those 2 things are actually one, but it's our senses that will tell us that it's 2. Just like when you look at a flame, right? You're just looking at a singularity, the flame, but your eyes are going to give you visual knowledge, and we'll call that fire, right? And then our hands are going to feel the effect of that, and we're going to call that heat. So we're going to break that unity into 2 parts, fire and heat, right? But they can't be separated. They are both a unity. It's our senses, our perspective of ignorance, assuming that it has parts, that causes us to see fire as 2, as it were, right? And so within our internal setup, we do the same thing. Duality is not because we see an external world. There is no external world to see, right? Duality happens within when we break ourselves into a thinker and a listener. Right? That's where duality comes from. The duality comes from within when we operate our mind as if there's a thinker, the sound of thought, and there's the listener to the thought. When in fact, in our condition anyway, the truth is there's only listener, right? There's only witness, that one without a second. All right, so the seventh plane, this is known as the union of Shiva and Shakti. Okay. This is where we see God and his power as one. They are no longer separated. When the Kundalini rises to the Sahasrara, that's the top, and the mind goes into Samadhi, the aspirant loses all consciousness of the outer world. He can no longer retain his physical body. If milk is poured into his mouth, it simply runs out again. In that state, the life breath lingers for 21 days, and then it passes out. Entering the black waters of the ocean, the ship never comes back. But the Ishvarakotis, such as the incarnations of God, they can come down from this state of samadhi, right? So if someone is a manifestation of God, an avatar, and they can come back. They can leave the body, completely go into that dissolution of one without a second, and then without any seed, they can come back again, right? And so that is why there's a certain reverence giving to them. That's why there's a specialness to them. They can go back and forth across that line. For us, we can just go in. There's no coming out. All right. But the Ishvarakotis, such as the incarnations of God, they can come down from the state of samadhi. They can descend from this exalted state because they like to live in the company of devotees and to enjoy the love of God. So those are the attachments right there. Those are the impurities that incarnations indulge in order to maintain a manifestation, in order to maintain a body. So they're attached to the company of devotees and the love of God. God retains in them the ego of knowledge or the ego of devotion so that they may teach men. Their minds move between the sixth and the seventh planes, right? The one without a second and seeing God everywhere. They run a boat race back and forth, as it were, between these two planes. After attaining samadhi, some souls of their own accord keep the ego of knowledge, but that ego does not create any attachment. It is like a line drawn on the water. Hanuman kept the servant ego after realizing God in both his personal and his impersonal aspects. He thought of himself as the servant of God. The great sages like Narada, Sanaka, Sananda, and Sanatana, and Sanat Kumara, after attaining the knowledge of Brahman, kept the servant ego and the ego of devotion. They are like big steamships, which not only cross the ocean themselves, but can carry many passengers to the other shore. There are two classes of Paramahamsas, of these knowers, one affirming the formless reality and the other affirming God with form. Trilanga Swami believed in the formless reality. Paramahamsas like him care for their own good alone. They feel satisfied if they themselves attain the goal. Right? But those Paramahamsas, we let Rangu in, those Paramahamsas who believe in God with form keep the love of God even after attaining the knowledge of Brahman, so that they may teach spiritual truth to others. They are like a pitcher of brimful of water. Part of the water may be poured into another pitcher. These perfected souls describe to others the various spiritual disciplines by which they have realized God. They do this only to teach others and to help them in spiritual life. With great effort, men dig a well for drinking water, using spades and baskets for the purpose. After the digging is over, some throw the spades and other implements into the well, not needing them anymore. But some of them put them away near the well so that others may use them. Some eat mangoes secretly and remove all trace of them by wiping their mouths with a towel, but some share the fruit with others. There are sages who, even after attaining knowledge, work to help others and also to enjoy the bliss of God in the company of devotees. I want to eat sugar. I don't want to be sugar. All right, we'll stop there for today.